Hello, and welcome to my channel. Try this as a series breaking down a certain game or playstyle of a game. Today we're going to be talking Commander and breaking down Magar of the Magic Strings. The video is broken down into chapters which you can find in the description or in the timeline. I'll be briefly covering Magar and then cover some win conditions and how we'll get there. I'll talk about some mana base and card draw strategies. I'll discuss other synergistic cards in the deck and why I think they'll help. I'll cover some other cards I cut from my example list why they didn't fit my list but they might fit yours. And finally I'll move on to some budget suggestions for the deck. If you enjoy this content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps other viewers discover the content I produce and is a great way to show support. With that said, let's dive in. Magar is a 3/3 Minotaur performer that costs 1 black-red. He has an activated ability that also costs 1 black-red that reads, note a name of target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard and put it onto the battlefield face down. It's a 3/3 creature with whenever this creature deals combat damage to the player, you may create a copy of that card with the noted name. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. If this creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. Everyone, Magar is incredibly strong and a very fun commander to run. This ability not being a tap ability or sorcery speed is actually kinda cracked. It's incredibly cheap to activate, and with plenty of rummage cards in red, we should be able to fill our graveyard very quickly. It's a really unique commander that brings a whole new light of Reanimator style deck. Making instant or sorceries into creatures and being able to recast them is insane value that can quickly snowball out of control. Magar himself is also cheap to cast, so if he's ever removed, we can easily get him back. Also, the reanimated cards work even if Magar leaves the battlefield. It's honestly just icing on the cake in this powerhouse. We're going to outvalue our opponents by recurring our instant and sorcery spells and then cast them for free. Since the ability Magar gives the creatures actually cast the noted cards, there's a ton of Spellslinger effects we can include. Aetherflux Reservoir is a fantastic alternate win condition in this deck. With a healthy amount of these spell creatures, we can quickly build up a storm count and laser beam our opponents. Other finishing effects are cards like Gutter Snipe. This is an amazing effect in this deck as we not only get the initial triggers but also the combat damage copies when we reanimate them later. There are several effects like these, and I'll shout out some more later in the video. Relentless Assault, Seize the Day, and Savage Beating are all cards that can go infinite using Magar's ability. Basically, we get infinite combats as long as they're able to connect. We just need to give them some sort of evasion like unblockable or flying to ensure we always get the combat trigger. Between a massive amount of drop potential we have, discard effects, and tutors, this should be a reliable combo to pull off. Starting off is the auto includes and Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and Thematic Compass. I've always found Thematic Compass to be a reliable card at any point in the game. It can help ensure land drops in early to mid game and then flip into a strictly better maze of it to protect us from Voltron commanders and other problem creatures. Big Score, Pirate's Pillage, and Unexpected Windfall all do the same thing. They generate us some treasures, draw us cards, and then feed our commander's ability. They're amazing cards to feed our engine and they're all worth running. Dockside Extortionist and Stormkiln Artist are 2 more cards to generate plenty of mana for us. Each combat damage trigger with our tokens gives us another treasure with the artist. This makes him probably the most reliable ramp card in the list. Ancient Copper Dragon and Goldspan Dragon might be a bit overkill for this deck. I always wanted to ensure I had plenty of mana to pull everything out of our graveyard, and these 2 cards are very good at making mana. I think this deck is a bit higher power than most of my other decks, but if you're looking for budget cuts, then I think these are 2 good ones to start with. The Sad Robot and Burnished Heart are some classics that will get basics to field. They're just reliable staples that are always welcome in non-green decks. Wayfarer's Bauble and Talisman of Indulgence are 2 more classic cards. The Bauble will also fetch us to land the field, while the Talismans are always nice rocks to run. Chromatic Lantern and Brass's Bounty are the last cards in the ramp section. I've mentioned before that I like Chromatic Lantern just so I don't have to worry about mana pips. 3 mana for this effect is a pretty good deal, and having a mana rock on top of it is a bonus. In 2 colors you don't really need it, but since I'm planning to dump my hand and pull several cards out of the graveyard at once, it really helps ensure that's possible. Brass's Bounty isn't incredible initially as we're not really ramping in lands to make a ton of treasures, however it's a great target for Magar's ability so we can cast it over and over again. I've mentioned a few rummage cards so far, but there's plenty in red we can add. Faithless Looting and Gaia Reach Sanitarium are some great rummage cards. There is a few in this deck and the land probably isn't needed, but it's a great backup if we don't draw another rummage spell. Thrill of Possibility and Tormenting Voice are 2 more cheap rummage cards. They're easy to cast in early game and cheap to cast later on if we need the mana for something else. Wheel of Fate and Reforge the Soul are cheap wheels that we can use to dump our hand and refill it. With all of these discard effects, we should be able to blaze through our deck quickly to feed our commander's ability. Sign in Blood and Knight's Whisper are two cheap draw spells that don't hurt us too badly. Mono Black has a few cards like these, and I decided to run these ones since they're just 2 mana. Last up is Zephyr Boots is a great card to not only rummage, but give one of our tokens flying for evasion. It's likely we'll always find an opponent open with flying to get more value from the tokens. If you're going to run any card from this video, you should run Voidmaw. It's budget friendly and can pull cards you lost back into the yard to reanimate later. We can use its ability at instant speed to catch our opponents off guard. It's the only way in the list to reuse our previously animated spells, so it's probably one of the best synergy cards in the deck. Garrick's Wake is a great one-sided board wipe to ensure we can keep all of our creature spells alive. If we're able to resolve one copy, then it's likely we'll always find an opening with its token to cast another. It can be a very oppressive card in this deck to control the board state. Electrostatic Field and Firebrand Archer are 2 cards we'll use to burn our opponents down in addition to Gutter Snipe. They will snowball like crazy as we continue to grow a board with Magar's ability. Keswick Flamebreather and a new card Towaki the Younger are 2 more creatures that will do the same. Towaki is only a single target, but it anthems our other burn cards and has lifelink to heal us a bit. Trailblazer Boots, Whisper Silk Cloak, and Rogue's Passage are some effects that will make our tokens unblockable. Even monocolored decks tend to run a few utility lands, so the boots will almost always make a creature unblockable. The Cloak and Land are amazing and will easily enable our infinite combat steps. The Cloak doesn't work with Seize the Day as we still need to be able to target it, but it's still very useful in most cases. Profane Tutor and Diabolic Tutor are 2 cards that are budget friendly and amazing in this list. I'm also running Demonic Tutor, which is a pretty expensive card and probably a good budget cut. Tutors tend to really up the power of your deck, especially in Magar as we can recur them with his ability. Shadow Spear and Embercleave both give trample to our tokens. Embercleave is a bit overkill, but Double Strike and Trample help get past Death Touch creatures. Double Strike also enables double cast for our tokens, which is a great bonus. The previously mentioned Zephyr Boots and Fleet Feather Sandals both give our creatures flying. The sandals also provide haste and can single-handedly enable our extra combat cards. Wild Magic Surge and Chaos Warp are 2 great removal spells we can recur. Even though they replace what they remove, they can hit any permanent, making them very flexible. There are a ton of removal spells in Rakdos and I won't cover them all, but Feed the Swarm and Baleful Mastery are 2 solid cards to run. There are a ton to pick from, so you can really add them to your preference. The cutting room floor is where I talk about some cards around or over $10 at the time of recording that I cut from my list for various reasons but are worth mentioning to run. Though these cards didn't find a home in my list, they might find a home in yours. First off is some alternate win conditions in Hellkite Tyrant and Revel and Riches. I've included Hellkite Tyrant in quite a few decks over the last couple months. There is now so much support for artifacts in most decks, and as long as you're in red, it's a solid backup win condition. In this deck there is some heavy treasure production, so either of these cards would be a solid backup plan. I don't really want to focus on either for this deck, and I think the list doesn't need them. However, it would be a disservice to not mention them. Next up is Jessica's Will as a solid mana production and card advantage generator. I normally don't even consider this card because I feel it's incredibly powerful, leading into huge swings in your favor. Dockside might generate a ton of mana, but this card also does so on top of getting card advantage. With Magar allowing us to cast it over and over again, that value just compounds on itself. It's worth pointing out that the mana wouldn't make it into the second main phase, but it can still feed instant cards we exile. Next up is Entomb, which is probably the best tutor you can include in this list. I also cut this card for power reasons. Though I run 3 tutors in this list, they all put things in the hand which I think slows the deck down just a little bit. For 4 mana, we can essentially tutor up and get a 3/3 of any instant or sorcery in our deck to swing out with on our next turn at instant speed. This is incredibly powerful and the synergy is so good it's worth bringing up. Finally, we have Reanimate as just sort of a fun card to recur over and over again. It doesn't really play into our strategy and we don't have a lot of creatures to bring back, however it's just a cool card to run. Being able to bring back our opponent's creatures to build up our own board just makes things even sweeter in this deck. First up is Lizard Blades and Fire Shrieker as 2 ways to give our tokens double strike. It doesn't give our creatures evasion, but it would get multiple copies of whatever connects. Blightning and Lightning Bolt are 2 cards that will help burn down our opponents. Connecting is a 3/3 creature, and then being able to bolt our opponents is pretty good value on top of all the other burn effects in this list. Valakut Awakening is a great card that can either be a land drop or help fill our yard with cards for our commander. Bituminous Blast and Breath of Malficor are 2 higher costing cards that would work very well as targets for Magar. Since we're casting the free copies, the Blast will still cascade to provide even more value. Siphon Mind and Read the Bones are 2 more draw cards that would be great targets for our commander. Siphon Mine's value scales down with the number of opponents we have, but it's still an amazing card to recur over and over again. I didn't cover every card in this deck or every suggestion I have for Magar, so if you'd like to see the rest, check out the link in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider clicking the like button and subscribing to the channel. Comment below on cards you think synergize well with this commander, and if you have any suggestions for commanders to build in the future. Thank you so much for watching, good luck, and have fun.